الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين ونستغفر ونؤمن ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تعالى في كتاب الكريم والقرآن المجيد ولا تكونوا كالذين خرجوا من ديارهم بطرا ورئاء الناس ويصدون عن سبيل الله والله بما يعملون محيط. Surah Anfal, Surah number 8 and verse number 47, it mentions two specific terminologies, and Allah is mentioning that وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ خَرَجُوا, about some people who at that time who left their homes to fight the Muslims. And batar wa ria'an nasa. Batar is self-conceit, is a kind of arrogance. And ria'an nas, the show of ostentation. And they had an evil plan, وَيَصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, to stop people from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And وَاللَّهُ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ مُحِيطٌ, and Allah saying He is encompassing everybody. They have a little chance in this world. Everybody have a chance. So the two words which were mentioned here is the batar and the riya and nas. We will focus on those words. And the topic today is the condemnation of self-admiration and its treatment. So all these two terminologies, self-conceit and show-off, is linked with what the topic is today. We have done a lot of talks, people have listened, the kibr, which is takabbur, jealousy, hasad, and dhulm, oppression. But I thought this is one of the topics which is ignored, self-praise. So Imam Al-Ghazali, who wrote Ihya Ulumuddin, more than 40 books, and this is the book number 29, which is actually condemnation of arrogance, kibr, and self-praise. So Kitab Zamb al-Kibr wal-Ujab. So the word which is used for self-praise is ujab. And in Quran also we have this word used, ajabtum, kasratum, when Muslims went for Hunayn and they thought they were large in number, but they had a problem. They lost the battle initially. So self-praise, ujab, in modern terminology, it could be narcissism, that people fall in love with their own self or own body. And the extreme form of ujab or self-admiration is that you fall in love with yourself, which we call in modern language self-love. Imam Al-Ghazali was very harsh on self-praise. He thought this is a disease, it's a sickness, and he condemned it completely. So this was the part 2 of this book. So Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in authentic hadith, he said, when there are 3 mortal vices, muhlikat. There are munjiyat and muhlikat, 2 opposites in Arabic terminal. Muhlikat, which destroys your soul or your good deeds, or you become overwhelmed with the sins, and munjiyat, which give you najat, or which give you safety. So our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said there are 3 mortal vices, muhlikat: covetousness, which is greed that is obeyed, and passion that is followed, and the person who admires himself. So self-admiration is not something Imam Al-Ghazali is condemning. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam already condemned it. Then there was a Sahabi called Abu Salaba, and he mentioned to him that if you live that time, like the end of the time, when people will follow their desires and passions and greed, and they self-praise themselves, then it is a difficult time. So they are no more here, but we are here now. Ibn Mas'ud, he was a great scholar. He said a lot of things, and he explained a lot of things for us. and we are grateful to him. He also said there are two things which are a great damnation. He condemned the two things. One, he condemned the despair, and the second is self-praise. He said the ultimate purpose of the life is in this, that you have falah, which is you become muflihun, felicitous, happy, fortunate, that you die as a good, righteous human being. And he said these two things, despair, that a person who becomes hopeless of the mercy of Allah, and the one who praises, he said these are two most damning things. He said the person who is in a state of despair, he already has given up that he can never succeed. He can never have mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he already condemned himself. He's already trapped in his mental trap, psychological trap. You see, like a self-defeat, self-sabotage. So a person who is unnecessarily depressed and hopeless of the mercy, so he is in a trap. He's laying a trap for himself. Yes, shaitan is helping him to trap himself, but he is also trapped himself. And he said the person who is a state of self-admiration, he already believes and feels that he has achieved that success. He said both cases are wrong. So may Allah protect us from that. Somebody asked Aisha radhiyallahu ta'ala anha, "O Ummul Mu'mineen, when is the man evil?" And she said, when he thinks that he is virtuous. When he self-certifies himself that I am now in the paradise, I've got a key in my pocket. So, and that is true. We can't say these sort of things, but we look around and people say that, I've reached a point. I hope you have reached a point. Even Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, whenever he used to say to his own companions, he said, I hope you are there. I hope you are in paradise. I hope, other than that he gave bushra to 10 sahabi, the companions. So Imam Al-Ghazali gives us there are three parts. One part is the causes of self-praise. Why do people self-praise? What are the categories? That is one part, which I'll quickly go through. And the last part is the treatment, which is also a short part. But the middle part is the most fascinating. He will explain us how does this sickness develop. So, if you go to the doctor and ask, you see, signs and symptoms which you can find out over the net, and you are already, even you know the treatment these days. What treatment? But it's impossible for a non-doctor to go on the website and find how does the disease develop. We call that pathogenesis. If it is a mental illness, it's psychopathology. So in this case, Imam Al-Ghazali has given the pathology or pathogenesis. How does it develop? That's the most fascinating. I got handouts. There are three main headings: the causes, the pathology, and the treatment. There are not many handouts, but Brother Shahid can give, and you can go home and read and reflect on it. They are very useful because it took me many hours to summarize the half of the book into few pages. And it's not an easy book to summarize because every word he writes is fascinating. So the first thing he says, the cause of self-praise is people self-praise because of the body. They believe, I got a beautiful body, I got a beautiful speech, white shining teeth, my eyes are blue or green, and I'm tall, fair, handsome, or something like that. And Imam Ghazali says this self-praise is of no benefit when you will end up in the grave and all your beautiful face will be nibbled by these little insects, and they will eat even the last part of your bones and your muscles. How can you self-praise when Allah gave you that body? Allah gave you that beauty? Because He is Al-Musawwar. He is the one who gives the shapes. He is Al-Wahhab, the bestower. How can you take credit for being Miss World or Miss London or Miss Slough or Mr. Universe or whatever. And he said the first cause is people have this because of the body. The second, he says that people self-praise themselves because of the strength and the force. And that means their resources at their disposal. And he gave examples of the Jews of Medina, who said, we will lock ourselves in the fortresses. And then, of course, they were not able to lock themselves. They had to destroy their own homes with their own hands. And he also gave examples of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, that he said he will go to 100 wives in one night and possibly have many children, and every wife will conceive. And he just gave an example that was a self-praise, but it didn't happen. He also gave example of Dawood alayhi salam, very respectfully, when he said he will be patient if there's a tribulation, and when the tribulation came, he realized he should not have said that. And he also gave example of people of, فَأَمَّا عَادٌ فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ بِغَيْرِ حَقٍّ. People of Ad and Samud, they were very powerful and strong, and they also self-praised. If you read the verses of these nations, they were always self-praising themselves, because they're so strong and big, and person could just stand 20 feet away from a tree and pull the tree out. And they are the one who carved houses in the mountains. So they were extremely powerful and very tall. The third thing he says that people self-praise is because of the intelligence. And they believe their intelligence, their cleverness, their understanding of the subtleties, understanding of the philosophy, understanding of the difficult topics, and they can benefit the world. He said this is a problem. This is a problem of scholars. This is a problem of people of the knowledge, and because of the intelligence and the knowledge they seek, so they can self-praise. And then said the worst thing they can do is they can impose, which is istabdad, a nice word in Arabic. In Urdu we use the same word. Then they impose their philosophy and thoughts and theories and ideas, and if they're not based on the Quran and the Sunnah, then they're also wrong, and they might even misguide people. And then he says, look, a man self-praising with the intelligence, if Allah gave you illness and sickness or a high-grade fever for one day, your intelligence will go. You will be shivering, going to the doctor and asking for a paracetamol, and asking your young son, 7-year-old, what shall I do? Where is intelligence now? He's just giving an example. And then he says, the example of verse 85 in Surah Isra or Bani Israel, when people ask about, you see, وَيَسَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Then he said, this is the example of a man, limitation of the man, that we can never have an ultimate knowledge. We'll always have a limitation in the knowledge, so there's no point self-praising your intelligence, what Allah has given you. It is the muqam of shukr. You should be doing the shukr. So he's condemning that. And he condemned the most people. The fourth cause is the people who self-praise because of the lineage. I belong to so-and-so family, I am a Sayyid, I am a Malik, I am a Sheikh, I am a Chaudhry, I am this, that, and other, I am Awan. In our days, in those days, there were different sort of names, and they were noble people. And he's saying, he's very harsh. He's saying, I don't want to say in English, you see, as we say, what's wrong with you? They were noble people, they did good things, they enjoyed life, they built all these buildings, they were hardworking. What have you done? What is your good deed? Why do you want to take credit for those people? And he said this is not right. And then he gives example from Surah Hujurat. Allah created, khalaq min zakar wa unsa, and all these nations and men and women, they're all equal in the sight of Allah. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, except somebody who's more righteous and pious. So this was the number 4 cause. The fifth cause, he said, is people self-praise because of their political connections with the powerful people. And here he is again very harsh. He said the people of, the rulers, They will be dragged by the forelock on the day of judgment. They will be asked if they've done any oppression, and Allah will deal with them the most severely. And if you know in reality who these people are and what will be the end result of all these oppressive rulers, and you want to associate yourself with them, and he say, are you self-praising? And this is what he says. He says, if a self-admirer knows this, that their end result will be dragging into the hell, this end result of unjust ruler to him, then he will prefer to associate with dogs than pigs. He writes that. It's not easy to write, but he could write at that time. We can't write these days. He said, if a person knows what is going to happen to oppressive rulers, and you are self-praising, admiring yourself because you are associating yourself, and so you would not love them. So there's no point, self-admiring if somebody is in a politician or in a high authority. He gave this example, and then he went to his people swaggering. And then he says the people also self-praise because of the numbers. Like, there are verses in the Quran, وَقَالُوا نَحْنُ أَكْثَرُ أَمْوَالًا وَأَوْلَادًا وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمُعَذَّبِينَ. The people who denied the truth and not believed in the Prophet Muhammad, they used to say, we have more children and more wealth. So the number is important. More number of friends, more number of sons, more number of daughters, more number of relatives, more number of companions, more number of supporters, more number of followers. Whatever it is, the numbers are important. So he did his research at that time, almost 900 years ago, and he's saying this is another reason people are self-praising themselves. And then he gave example of the Muslims also, and I'm sure you know the history. Allah said that we, gave victory to Muslims in many, مَوَاطِنُ كَثِيرَةٍ وَيَوْمَ حُنَيْنٍ إِذَا عَجَبَتْكُمْ كَثْرَتُكُمْ فَلَمْ تُغْنِ عَنْكُمْ شَيْئًا وَضَاقَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحَبَتْ ثُمَّ وَلَّيْتُمْ مُدْبِرِينَ. What it means is that Muslims at that one stage said, we are large in number, who can defeat us? And then what happened in Hunayn, and when you were in great number, you were pleased with that. That means you were self-praising at that time, but it did not avail you at all. And earth was confining for you, daqat, with its vastness. Then you turned back, fleeing. So the Muslims had a setback at that time because they thought they're 10,000, 20,000 number, they can win the. So Allah doesn't like that. So the point is, Allah does not like the self-praise. Because self-admiration, I'm not talking of going to the interview panel and for your job and you are slightly embellishing yourself. No, that's not what I'm talking about. That is allowed. If you've written a book, you can tell about your book. That's not. It is a persistent behavior. I'll come in the pathology, how does it develop? That it is a persistent behavior in levels of self-admiration which is condemning. And he said, if you want to self-praise because you are associated with the high-level people, you do not know when you die, all those people and your old close friends, they will be the first one to pick you up and take you to the masjid or somewhere and you pray your janazah and bury you and come back and start eating. He said it is the most closest people, your own brothers and sisters and your friends, your allies. So how can you enjoy and self-admire yourself because of them? Have you not heard that يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ? And that day when everyone will flee from his brother, أُمِّهِ أَبِي, and from your mother and your father, وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَبَنِيهِ, and the children and spouse, they all flee from each other. And number 7 cause, he said, it is the wealth. And wealth, we all know that. This is the biggest problem when people have that wealth and money. Even though Allah has given them, Allah can give somebody a large quantity to test him, or a small quantity to test him, or nothing to test him, or bagair hisab, and we all believe in that. We still have to work hard, no doubt about that. Working hard is essential, but we do see some people work very hard and their financial gains are not as much as other people. There must be a reason behind that. Other people are working a little bit hard and they don't even have qualification. They become millionaires, even billionaires in the world. very high positions, maybe even presidents. So that is not something to self-praise or self-admire. And he said if they knew the dangers of the wealth, they will never self-admire because of the wealth. He said, have they not heard the evil of the wealth? If misguided, it starts corruption. If a wealth is in the hand of a misguided person, he will corrupt the society. He will bribe people or accept the bribes. He will oppress people. This is the evil of wealth. He will become unjust, and he will cause, as I said, moral corruption. He will become extravagant. He will become arrogant. He will have ostentation, show off, pathological greed. He will be jealous, and he would have a delusions of superiority and addiction of wealth. He will neglect his family, and he will have obsessional behavior, and he will become almost blind in his heart. So these are the evils of the wealth. I hope you see people who fear Allah, they can have a wealth, they will not have this problem. But the wealth can cause this problem, and you have seen and heard some people who were very righteous and pious, but once they have the wealth, they actually reach that level. So may Allah protect us from that. And the eighth one says the people self-praise is because of self-opinions. False opinions, sorry. He said either this false opinion comes from yourself or from other people. If you got a wealth and they praise you, and you are duped and seduced by that, because you're already in that state that you are somebody, you are a celebrity, you are in paradise, you are in the court of Allah, and everybody is liking and respecting and welcoming you, even though the day of judgment has not been established yet. So false opinions, he says, this is another big sort of problem. Kullu hizbin bima ladayhim farihun. And he gave that example. One of the principles in the Quran is that all people have self-admiration and not deep thinkers, and they are just happy with themselves, whatever. Then he gave example of people of innovation, that they are happy. People of sectarianism in that time who wanted to be in a small groups and small group mentality, and they just were happy with what they were doing. And he said they were also self-praising, not realizing you have to go back to Quran and Sunnah and seek help from scholars who understand your religion and your deen. So he said about these false opinions, he said this type of ignorant person, and there's a very nice word in English, ignoramus. One is ignorant, and ignoramus is who is more ignorant than even ignorant. So they're known as ignoramus. He said this type of ignoramus should always doubt his opinions. He said this is his treatment. He should not always have his opinion on top of everybody else. He should doubt his opinions and not to be deluded by them. Such a person should not engage in discussion regarding principles, which is usul and juristic viewpoint, and creedal matters, which is mazahib, because he will perish from whence he perceives not due to his ignorance. But in modern time, other than 8 categories, can anybody think what are the other things which can lead to self-praise in our time? Not those 8 causes, the wealth, the body, the beauty, the political ties, the opinions. In our times, you must have heard the people self-praise, that they go beyond the limit. On holidays, if they come back, they self-praise. The hotel they stayed, that is ongoing. The food they ate, and the places they visited, it's ongoing self-praise. Expensive foods, and people who buy luxury apartments, they also self-praise too. Whenever they got opportunity, they will always self-praise, even though other people might be bored of that. Now he says, how does this self-praise, illness and disease and sickness, how does it develop? He said, this is a precursor of arrogance. Self-praise is a behavior which is driven by self-praise has a precursor, that is show off. But self-praise is itself is a precursor, it can lead to arrogance. So this is a tight chain. Ostentation, show off, riya an-nasa, and then this self-admiration, which is ujab, And the third thing is, if you don't control it, it will lead to, ultimately, to arrogance, kibr. He said the people develop, for one reason is, they actually are forgetful and they neglect that what he is doing, his life is all temporary. He has forgotten how he is born from clay, from nutfa, alaka, from that vile fluid. He has forgotten his origin. At one time, Shaya Madhkura, he was not even mentioned. So I'm showing up, and this, he was created from that clay, so he's forgotten that. He's forgetful that he has to die one day, so that's why he is in his own mind and state. The second reason he says that why people develop this self-admiration is that they presume assumptions, false assumption that they will be forgiven. The third reason he says that they have a false concept and they brag about the worship and the religious acts, and as if they are doing a favor to Allah. I am a witness to that. People mention those things as if they're doing a favor to Allah. They will complain to Allah, oh Allah, I did 200 tasbeehs and this, that, and other. My son is still not obedient to me. My sister's cancer has still not disappeared. As if you are bribing Allah, a'udhu billah. So this is another sort of, he's saying, a bad concept in the mind of a self-admirer, that he is praying or whatever as if he's doing a favor to Allah and not realizing. So he's mentioning his own worship, his own tahajjud. He's already mentioned his tahajjud, and already mentioned his fajr prayer. And then I think if somebody is talking about something, he says, oh yes, I went to Masjid for Asr also. So this is what he's trying to mention, because that's your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he has forgotten that Allah is the provider, and he lacks insight. He lacks his basira. And this is one of the defects in his thinking. When people self-admire too much, they actually lack that we should praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not self-admiration. This is from shaitan. He said this is a delusional state, and the person is deluded with respect to himself and his Lord, and feels safe from the punishment of Allah. Whereas Allah does not like people self-praise, because this is very close to show-off. This is very close to takabbur. And if a person has some home or something else, and he's always saying, Imam Al-Ghazali is saying that he has this speculation that he is special in the sight of Allah, as if nobody else has a home, nobody else has a car, and he goes all about and say self-praising and admiring himself and mentioning about his wealth, about his property, about his material wealth. So we should, I think, be careful. I believe we all have done it unintentionally. Then we should be very, very careful. And he said this person also have some intellectual issue and a problem if he is continuously self-admiring himself. It is not right. His knowledge will be problematic. He will have problem. He said if he doesn't stop, he reaches the stage of, as I mentioned, the narcissism, which is in men, and the vanity in women, that you fall in love with yourself and you spend all the time for the women in the beauty parlor and the men in the gym because they just want to look beautiful. I'm talking of extreme. I'm not talking of normal people. You should continue to go to gym and to beauty. I'm not saying that. It is extreme form. Because if you do the extreme form, and it will fall into the category of self-admiration and narcissism or vanity in women and ujub. There was a time when the men were only associated with narcissism, building muscles, but not anymore. Women are in boxing, they are in wrestling, they are in gym, they're building muscle, they're taking steroids, so on and so forth. So the narcissism and transferred from men to women now. The vanity was, at one time, was always associated this beautification to the women. Now it is transferred to the men also, because the men also spend a lot of time, if you're working in the film industry, to beautify yourself. So it's no more, restricted to one gender. Now he's saying the people who self-admire, they are always looking down upon other people. And they consider other people as ignorant. And they insist on exposing their errors, and they are in a state of hyper-criticism. They're always hyper-criticizing. They have inflated self-opinion, and they have a perception problem. So there were so many things and so much detail he given how it develops. So I'll just summarize that. I summarize this, what Imam Al-Ghazali is saying, perhaps, I hope I'm right, there are 3 levels of self-praise. The first level I call is opportunistic ostentation or show-off. That whenever you got a time or place or opportunity, you will always self-praise. You always tell about yourself. You always tell about your wealth or your car or your degree or diploma or money or something. So you're opportunistic. At this stage, you don't want to humiliate people. You just want to. The second stage, he says, is higher. It is like a compulsive self-admiration. And now you reach the next level, level 2, where you have a compulsion. Even if there's no opportunity, you will drag people's attention to tell them that I have this and that, and I am from this and that, I can do this and that. And the final level, according to Imam Al-Ghazali, if I just divide everything into 3 levels, I will call it a malignant ignorance. It is the highest level when a person is compulsive, he is showing off. But in this level, even in level 2, the person has an intention to humiliate other people, to put them down. Because they may be less in money, less in wealth, less in health, less in beauty, less in property. So when they mention about these big things in those people, they actually are humiliating other people at the same time. So they have reached the level 3, which is very, very close or almost an arrogant level. Self-admirer in the level 3 fails to understand that in reality listeners, which could be servants, employees, colleagues, relatives, poor relatives, and the people you have favored are rather fed up by his long sessions of self-admiration. And this level 3 is driven by pride, and self-admirer is disliked by everyone. Nobody likes that person then, because he's imposing himself. Now the last section is shorter one. So this is, he says, how does it develop? So it develops because of his forgetfulness, because of his neglect, because of his own intellectual problem, because of his own mental trapping, because of his own becoming victim and seduction of a shaitan, that he is the best, he is the better, he is the favored one. But he is in a state of sin, because now it's harming and hurting people. So what is the treatment for that? Treatment part is not very difficult. Imam Al-Ghazali says, this is probably the most important statement in the treatment. He said, know that treatment of every disease is to counter its cause, which is sabab or illah, with its opposite. The cause of self-admiration is pure ignorance. He said it's a pure ignorance, so its treatment can only be knowledge which opposes this ignorance. That means the person actually has forgotten, and whatever he has, he believes he is the best. And the second, and this ignorance are for many types. If you look at the Quranic model, there are 4 types of ignorance or jahiliyyah are mentioned. One is hamiyatul jahiliyyah, another one tabarrujul jahiliyyah. Tabarruj is related with immorality, and hamiyya is related with somebody is chauvinistic. So they actually are the diseases which originate from your heart. But there are other kind of jahiliyyah, which is hukm al-jahiliyyah and zann al-jahiliyyah, that you just sort of believe your conjecture and speculation is the best one, and you give your own commands, then it is because of the defect of your own intellect. So he should do self-evaluation, fear Allah, and realize his own helplessness. So this ignoramus should reflect that Allah is the fashioner, al-musawwir and bestower, al-wahhab, of all the blessings, including his beauty, his body, his wealth, and he will eventually have to die, and death and remembrance about the grave is extremely important. So these people, Imam Al-Ghazali is saying, so the person who is self-admiring himself all the time should remember that. Where did you come from and where are you going? He says it is important, 2-3 more points, that this person must treat his show-off, because show-off is driving that person. Anybody who's in a state of self-admiration, and if you look at politicians, most of them, whether it's a west or a east or a south or a north, they're always self-admiring. I don't know what's right or wrong about that. Imam Al-Ghazali is saying if somebody is suffering from the disease level 2 or 3, like a complicated one, the self-admiration, and they can't stop, then they have to treat their show-off, because showing off is a driving force. He said to treat your show-off, there are 4 things you need to do. Number 1, you have to remove 4 things from you using your mind. Love of praise. If anybody praises you, you run away, stop them, because you love the praise. And the second is the fear of blame. So you're always fearful of the blame of other people. And the third one is that you have a desire for the worldly benefits. And the fourth one is fear of harm from other people. He said you have to remove these 4 things so that you can get rid of your ostentation and show off. Then he gave 2 examples. Interesting example. Imam Al-Ghazali said there was a poor, intelligent, knowledgeable person, and he's complaining and whining about that. He sees an ignorant person, is not intelligent, he is not wise, he's got a lot of money. And Imam Al-Ghazali says, if you ask this intelligent person who's poor and wise and knowledgeable, so would you swap your intelligence with that person? Would you give him the intelligence and take his money and everything, and also take his ignorance? Will you do that? He said he will never do that. He said another complainant, there's a beautiful woman, she's very poor, doesn't even have proper clothes to wear, and she is complaining and moaning and groaning about somebody who is rich and wearing a nice jewelry and diamonds and gold. And Imam Al-Ghazali said, if you ask this poor woman who is beautiful, really beautiful, will you exchange your beauty with that ugly woman who's got gold and silver jewelry and nice clothes? She will never do that. He said if she will never do that, and the first example, that intelligent man will never swap his intelligence and wisdom with that rich person who is ignorant, he said then this is a time to reflect for the mankind that you should be grateful to Allah. Allah has compensated you for that. So anybody who is beautiful and not rich, that's your compensation. Anybody who is poor but more intelligent than the rich people, that's your compensation. So gratitude is this next part of the treatment. And he said the purification comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything is Allah's mercy. And he gave the concluding remarks, which I'll just read it and then we finish. It is a beautiful book. Look, it only costs 11-12 pounds. So there's no harm in buying for each other. I said don't give a gift of mithai and all those things and chocolates to each other, to the Muslim brothers and sisters now. Start giving some books. It's only 11 or 12 pounds, but it's a beautiful, translated by Muhammad Rustam in 2018, book number 29. So condemnation of arrogance and ujub. So self-praise is not mentioned many times. We mention very casually in our talks, but I've not heard somebody sort of done a detailed sort of analysis like Imam Al-Ghazali said. That's why I chose this topic. The self-praise, we don't think it is a serious problem, but I believe after reading this book, it is a serious problem because you are elevating yourself. So Imam Al-Ghazali says, so this treatment he has mentioned, remember your death, remember your origin, and remember that Allah is the bestower. He said, this therefore is the cure that will uproot the substance of self-admiration from the heart. He said, if the person really look at this treatment, what he is presented, so it will take the seeds of self-praise and ostentation and riya out of his heart. And whenever this cure overcomes the person's heart, he will become preoccupied with the fear of his blessings being stripped away because of his self-admiration of these blessings. And he gave many examples that habitat amaluhum was one of the principles of the Quran mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf and a couple of other places also, where people actually lose everything. He gave example of a story of two friends in Surah Al-Kahf, that one person was boasting about, I have more men and more land and more seeds and more farms, but he lost it. He said the person who is self-admiring, a rich person regarding his or her blessings, so they should be fearful of Allah. They can leave them any time, and even if they die, they will not going to take in their grave. So whenever this cure overcomes the person's heart, he will become preoccupied with the fear of his blessing being stripped away because of his self-admiration and these blessings. So indeed, he will look to the unbelievers and sinners who have been stripped of blessings of faith and obedience without having committed a prior sin, and will be fearful of that. And then he says, oh, human being, if you got a faith, you got everything. And I will add, if you got a moral character, you got everything. If you got a knowledge and the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you got everything. Other people in the world can have many things, and they can even control all the property or the money or whatever it is. If they don't have a faith, they have nothing. So we finish off. The key point is the root cause of self-admiration is what? Pure ignorance. Ostentation, the drive to show off, is a driving force behind self-admiration. Self-admiration has got 3 levels, and if on level 2 and 3 you can lead to where? To arrogance. And he finished off Imam Al-Ghazali with these verses from Surah Abasa, قُتْلَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا أَكْفَرَ. So curse or destroys the man, how disbelieving or ungrateful he is. مِنْ أَيِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَ. He's just summarizing now. Doesn't he remember how he was created? From alaka, from nutfa. And min nutfatin khalaqahu qaddara. And Allah is the one, He created him from that sperm drop and destined for him his life. Summa sabila yassara, then made things easy for him. And summa amatahu fa'akbara, then again he allowed them to die. And summa iza sha anshara, then when he wills, he will resurrect them and collect all of us together. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this apparently benign sort of thing, self-praising, but if it becomes more serious and compulsive and regular, then it becomes a sinful thing, and it can become an extreme problem for yourself and your friends and your family. So I thought it was an interesting topic. So may Allah sort of protect us from that. So, but you need to go home and look at this handout, these causes and the development pathology and also the treatments, because all other, this point I forgot to mention, all other sicknesses, diseases of the heart, we call it amrad al-qulub, or the spiritual diseases of the heart. Like resentment, anger, jealousy, hypocrisy, narcissism, vanity, and rebelliousness, and so on and so forth, and immorality. All these are diseases of the heart. Their pathology is exactly the same. It is either forgetfulness, either neglect, either a defect in your understanding and your own perception, or that you are a slave of your own desires and passions. So whatever the pathology is, the 13 points are there. I think the 13 points. So read them carefully. These are the points also applicable at almost all other spiritual diseases and ailments of the heart. So this is not the disease of the physical heart, like ischemic heart disease, or you have a bypass operation, or a stent is being inserted. It is a spiritual heart we're talking about. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Any quick comments or questions, please? Since we are within our time, so we can continue. Any questions or comments on self-praise? All what you need to do is at least promise me, and I'll promise you, we will reduce our self-praising and self-admiration. So if there's no question, that means everybody wants to go home and everybody's tired. Any questions?
No questions. I'd make a comment that the times we live in, it's all about
selfie mania.
It is about selfies, promoting.
Hundreds of things of
It's very difficult to get from them.
Okay, let me answer this question. I was hoping this question will be raised. So Brother Ashraf is asking a question. Well, the time we are living in, it is all about vanity, because we are living in front of that camera. And I call it the father of all peeping toms, you see. This camera is in front of us. We can take our photos and selfies and whatever. In order to answer your question, so we need to find out there are 3 levels of self-praise. I said the first level is where a person is not humiliating others. They're not putting other people down. It is the second level when you have a compulsion to show off, and then you have a desire that other people will also mention or spread your goodness, or your charity, or your beauty, or your wealth, or whatever the case may be. If the person is at level 1 only and just involved within himself or herself and not causing any issue or a problem or harming others or insulting others, like the level 3 of self-praise I mentioned, which I call it a malignant ignorance, then I think we just have to leave it. This is part of the time, part of the system we are living in, part of the tools we have got, and these tools are very, very, very powerful. This iPhone is extremely powerful. The whole world is in your palm. The world's biggest library, and the world's biggest knowledge base, and also world's biggest corruption and biggest immorality. Everything is in there. We have spoken about that. So I think it depends on if it is just selfie and other things, and people are presenting and they don't really want to harm. We just have to, if they're a own member of the family, we just advise them. And if they are the members of other people, we don't even go there, because if you ask anybody, they say, own your bike. We're living in that time. Shah Sahab?
A very nice lecture. I was just going to ask you, are there any cultures or any communities that are more susceptible to this type of illness? Like the people from the Indian subcontinent, or from North America, or what's your view on that?
Shah Sahab has asked a very difficult question. He is asking, do we know that which cultures are more susceptible to self-admiration and self-praise? I do not know exact answer, but in my personal experience, from every culture, you have people who will go with excessive self-praising, excessive self-admiration. They will not realize what they're doing. But I think it's in every culture, but especially in Britain, maybe the people who come from Middle East or people who come from Southeast Asia, they might have a slightly more tendency to self-admire and self-praise, if that's what you want to. That's only my observation, but I'm not making any blanket statement or giving any diagnosis. I've not done any research or survey. It's my own viewpoint. Then possibly women used to do a little bit more, but in my experience, the men are doing more than women now. Women tend to complain more, GMC, groaning, moaning, complaining, criticizing, so on and so forth, and men are more angry as compared to them. But all what we can say is that this problem, or if we do call it a problem, or just an observation or statistics of self-praise, they have certainly increased. Prophet ﷺ predicted, this is where I started. He said, when you find people follow their passions, people follow their covetousness, their greed, and their self-praise, these are the signs of the end of the time. He was telling his companion, ﷺ, at that time, 1430 years ago, that if you live in that time, so just be careful, protect yourself.
Sorry, and just to add on to that,
if you got any views, you can, yeah?
What could you suggest to the ordinary layperson, the ordinary individual, to protect themselves from that?
Imam Al-Ghazali, I think he put everything in perspective. We always go back to the same thing. What he said was the pure cause of all such behavior is ignorance, neglect, forgetfulness, having false perception and false speculation about yourself. And there's nothing, the antidote of the ignorance is seeking knowledge, sitting with the people of knowledge, sitting or asking questions, or visiting the scholars, respecting the scholars, and also students of the knowledge, or people sometimes they don't have a knowledge, but they're still wise people. They're not gone to school or college. If you go to the villages in Middle East and villages in Pakistan and India, I have come across people are so brilliant, so wise people. They're not gone to college. So we're talking of the wisdom at the same time, and not always the theoretical knowledge, because theoretical knowledge can be dangerous these days. Somebody asked a good question, you can ask which scholar to follow. And I think the best answer for that is the scholars for your Aqidah, for your belief system. It is better to follow the scholars who have died. Why? Because they have their authenticity has already been proven, and the whole world and the Ummah, majority of people have certified them, so they were the good scholars. It's not an absolute statement. It does not mean that if there are current scholars or students of knowledge, you don't follow them, you listen to them. But their authenticity has not been established yet, because they're still alive. Authenticity is always established when you die. And people of the knowledge or students of knowledge or activists, they have their own fitna. They're going through their fitna. However, for the contemporary matters, it's better to consult them, because those people who have died, they did not have these problems, so you still need people of the knowledge and students of the knowledge. We don't have many good scholars. There are very few in the world now. They are endangered species, our scholarship, unfortunately. Shall we call it a day? Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu Rasulil Kareem. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا الا غفرته ولا هما الا فرجته ولا دينا الا قضيته ولا مريدا الا شفيته ولا ضالا الا هديته ولا حاجه من حوائج الدنيا والاخره الا قضيتها يا ارحم الراحمين. ربنا ظلمنا انفسنا ولم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا افرغ علينا صبرا وثبت اقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا لا تجعلنا فتنه للقوم الظالمين ونجنا برحمتك من القوم الكافرين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم ثبت على الإسلام ونور قلوبنا بنور الإيمان. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Just a small announcement that this series of lectures is finished now, so you can have a break and enjoy and have a good rest. I will restart inshallah in March. So 4 weeks break.